Oi, how's it going, cunts? I'm Australian. Put a shrimp on the barbie. Whatever. Alright, I don't know how real Australians speak. I say that as a real Australian. I'm not good at it, okay? I don't have like a super strong accent. I guess I do to some people. It's not as strong as it possibly could be, trust me. There are much more Australians out there. But being Australian, I want to talk about Australian films today, which is usually a kind of side of movies that I'm not the biggest fan of, if I'm being honest. They just typically aren't that great. A lot of movies that we make have to be funded through the government. That's really the only way that, a lot of these movies can get any sort of funding and can eventually get made. And so a lot of them are about Australia and are specifically about like the beauty of Australia, and they're very friendly and they look all nice and everything. Whereas on the flip side, if it's not a very nice family-friendly film, it's very gritty and it's just not enjoyable. I feel like there's not that many that are kind of in the halfway point. You know what I mean? There's Snowtown, and then there's Oddball, which is about a dog and a penguin or something. And there's not that much that's in between. But that's what I'm here for. I'm the middleman. I'm going to tell you what are some legitimately good movies, and that are Australian movies that aren't specifically about Australia. And specifically, I want to start off by talking about horror movies, because that's kind of what my channel's about a little bit. So yeah, let's get to it, shall we? The best Australian movies, in my opinion, starting off with Boys in the Trees. Boys in the Trees is a Halloween film through and through. Even though Halloween isn't a huge factor here in Australia at all, really, this is definitely a Halloween film. It has that Halloween spirit. It is about bullying, basically. It's about outgrowing your friends and befriending a loser, sort of. It is about reuniting with friends as well, and it is definitely about growing up and kind of thinking that you're so much cooler than you actually are, and realizing that you might actually be kind of a dick. Boys in the Trees is also shot beautifully. This is a fantastically shot film. It's masterful, if I'm being honest. I think that Boys in the Trees is one of the best films, not just from Australia, but of all time. And I'm not even saying that as an exaggeration. This is easily in my top 50 films, and I would recommend pretty much anybody to please watch it. It deserves your attention. It deserves to make a bit of cash. It deserves to be seen. It screams to be seen, because it is just masterful, and I love it. I genuinely love it so much. Anyway, next up is Cargo. Cargo is a movie starring Martin Freeman about a father who has been bitten by a zombie in a zombie apocalypse and knows that he has only 24 hours to live. But he also has a baby. And so basically the whole movie is set in real time, not quite real time, but it's set over the course of this day as he tries to figure out what he's going to do with his baby. He wants to leave the baby with somebody. He wants it to have a life. And so it is a very depressing film in that way, as we watch him desperately seek out refuge, even though he knows that he is about to die. It is a classic case of a very selfless man here. He's a very good parent, and it's very moving because of that. And I think that this is a brilliant film as well. This one is a bit more about Australia because it's set in the outback and stuff, but it's mainly like a zombie apocalypse film, which isn't exactly that common when it comes to Australian films, and so I can definitely appreciate that. I love this very much. I reviewed it a few years ago when I saw it, and I please would beg you to watch it. It's another really good one. Then is Wormwood, and this is definitely a bit of a shift in gears here, because this is full throttle just silly. This is another zombie movie actually, but it is kind of this weird mashup between Mad Max and maybe Dawn of the Dead or something like that, where it's these people that put on armor and everything and drive around with these cars with spikes on them, killing zombies and stuff. It's over the top, it's crazy, it's bizarre, it's a very strange film. I enjoy the hell out of it, and it's one of my most enjoyable cinema sessions that I ever had when I first saw this movie when it first came out, because the audience all knew what they were going in for, and they all knew they were laughing at the right times. Everybody was having a really good time together, and there was just kind of this nice community feeling about watching this film with a live audience that was cool about it. Obviously, you probably can't do that, so I'm sorry for recommending the movie and telling you that's the best way to watch it, and you can't, but I'm just saying. It is a good film on its own though, and I would recommend it as well. Hey, I'm just editing, and at the time of recording this video I hadn't seen it, but there is also the sequel Wormwood Apocalypse, which is also really good. Yeah, I hadn't seen it yet, but yeah, I feel similar about that. It's awesome, huge recommend. Next up is Rogue, and this is a movie about a giant crocodile, and that's about all I need to tell you. If that sounds good, you're going to want to watch it. If that sounds dumb, you're going to think it's dumb, and you're not going to like it anyway. But yeah, it does take itself slightly more seriously than you might think, though, and it actually is surprisingly violent for having the M rating here in Australia, which is 15 and above, but it's not restricted to 15 and above, it's just recommended to 15 and above. That's boring to you, you don't care. But it is kind of like just this slasher movie with a giant crocodile, and it's enjoyable. I like it quite a bit. Then there is Wolf Creek, which everybody kind of knows about at this point, I have to say, but yeah, it's basically our version of a classic Australian slasher film about these people who go backpacking in the outback and everything and get picked up by this one crazy guy who seems like he's kind of nice but is a bit creepy and you're not really sure if you should trust him. And then, of course, he then goes on to torture these people and kill them. And it's quite a disturbing film. It's very realistic, and it actually doesn't go that hard in terms of depicting a strong sense of violence. Like, it does and it doesn't, because it's more suggestive, and it's more like he could do anything right now. Often, the camera will cut away from certain things and stuff like that, but it's just that kind of visceral reaction to, like, anything could happen here, and the things that it does show is pretty grisly. Wolf Creek is definitely one to appreciate as a horror fan, and yeah, I think it is a great representation for what Australian films can and should be. And also there's Wolf Creek 2, which is way more silly than the first Wolf Creek, as literally at the very start of the film, like, the villain guy snipes these cops, like a cop car from like fucking kilometers away. They're a while away, and he snipes him, and he gets the driver in the head as he's driving away, and he drives off a cliff, and then it explodes, and he goes down and finishes the other guy off. Like, it's just so stupid. It's so dumb and not at all similar to the first film. But I'd also recommend it. I enjoy the second Wolf Creek as well. It's kind of underrated. Next up is, and very much in the same vein as Wolf Creek, this had the same sort of reputation for being very grisly. And you know it, you know this one, it is Saw, okay? I'm talking about Saw. Technically, this is an American film, okay? It's an American company behind it. It's set in America, there are American actors. But Leigh Whannell, the writer, and James Wan, the director, are my two Aussie boys from Australia. I mean, obviously that's what Aussie means, right? And they made it big. They made this film. This was their dream project. This was their, idea and everything. They are the ones that created it. So as far as I'm concerned, Saw is an Australian film. And I kind of want to take ownership for all of the ones that came after it. But, the James Wan and Leigh Whannell slowly dropped off of the sequels, and it really became Darren Lynn Bousman's series. And he's American, so Saw kind of became way more of an American thing than it already was. Speaking of Leigh Whannell, though, and kind of Australian films, is Upgrade. Behind me, Upgrade. Some of this is shot near where I live, which is exciting, and this is, for the most part, another one that is technically American, but Leigh Whannell is the one that wrote and directed this, and I'm kind of counting it and taking some ownership for this one as well, because Upgrade is incredible, and we deserve it. Then there's also Daybreakers, another example of one that's set in America. It's got Ethan Hawke in it and Willem Dafoe. It's an American film quite clearly when it comes to the setting and everything, but it was shot here, and some of the filmmakers and everything, this is kind of an Australian film, okay? Some of the people behind it were Australian, and it was shot here, so and it's a good film. Just by the way, Daybreakers is a movie about vampires who are starting to run low, like, as a society, in blood. And basically they are starting to take these kind of like watered down versions of blood as they are desperately trying to find some sort of new source. And yeah, it's set in like this sci-fi dystopian vampire world, but it's a low budget film, so it's kind of funny how they do make that work. Like, they do a really good job of making this a big, believable, ambitious world, even though it is kind of this like low budget, weird movie that not a lot of people have heard of. And I've always thought it was a really good film. And I really enjoy it. It's straight up good. Then there's The Babadook, which is a movie that I infamously am not the biggest fan of, I have to say, but I appreciate what it's going for. I appreciate that it is going for the more like mental health sort of metaphor that is going on there and everything. And it's, definitely an effectively creepy film. It's not my favorite, but I did think it was worth mentioning because it is quite popular to the people who do really enjoy it. And I definitely highly respect it, even if I don't personally love it all that much. Then by the same director, of The Babadook comes The Nightingale, which is a movie that I do absolutely love. It is unfortunately, it's a rape revenge film set in Australia in like the 1800s, and it is definitely a movie that gives the female protagonist a voice as she takes down some of the, people that she's getting revenge on and everything. It's definitely a movie that will make you sympathize with her, but it's also a movie that feels a bit exploitive to me. It's a movie that relies on rape scenes a little too heavily for me, that I just didn't feel like were very necessary. I understand that a lot of these movies like these kind of have to show you the harsh side so that you can get behind the characters, but I think implication does wonders, and I feel like these movies often forget that. I have the same issue with other movies like I Spit on Your Grave, for example, where it's like, I get it, you don't need to show me half an hour of a rape scene or whatever. I understand, I can get behind the main character getting the revenge for what happened. You can kind of skim over that scene. I don't think it is helping anybody showing it. It's only really potentially triggering people and making other people uncomfortable. I don't think that it's particularly a good thing to be doing. But The Nightingale, apart from that, is fantastically shot and is actually a surprisingly touching film as well. I really, really do recommend that one quite a lot. And then there is The Loved Ones, which again, like The Babadook, is a movie that I don't actually personally love too much, but I do like it quite a lot. Like, I don't know, I'm kind of halfway there, but this is about a crazy girl who wants to take, who wants to take a boy on a date or whatever to the prom, even though we don't have proms here, but to a school dance or whatever. But basically, the feelings are not mutual, and she has kidnapped this guy, and he kind of just has to go about finding his way out of this house with this crazy girl and her father, who is also supporting all of this crazy shit going on for some reason as well. And it's kind of like this torturous film where you see her do some monstrous things to this guy and everything, but it's also got some great character work in here as we watch these characters, like him desperately trying to escape and also pretending for some of the part where it's like, oh yeah, I like you, whatever, and then he's like trying to get the fuck out of there. And as we watch the mentality of the girl as well and try and figure out what exactly is going on with her. I think this is a very interesting film. It's definitely like a horror classic for Australians, but not my favorite film. And then there is another movie called Scare Campaign, which I don't remember that well, and I don't want to speak out of turn, so I don't want to say too much because I don't remember it that well, but I remember loving it and I wanted to mention it. So there's the name poster. Check it out if you want. Then there's another one called Little Monsters, which I reviewed a couple years ago when this came out. This is a movie that stars Lupita Nyong'o, and it is another zombie movie in Australia. This is about a kindergarten teacher who is looking after all these kids at like a petting zoo that they visit, where the zombie apocalypse eventually breaks out, and she has to continuously trick these kids into believing that nothing wrong is going on as she kind of pretends to be happy and stuff, all while being super stressed out and everything, while traversing this zombie apocalypse, all just on this small petting zoo farm place. And it's a zombie comedy horror film, and I enjoy it quite a bit. And now I just want to briefly say some non-horror Australian movies that I think are really good. First up is Mad Max Fury Road, but you already know Mad Max Fury Road, okay? It's a fantastic film, non-stop action, and it's fantastic. I already said fantastic. You already know it as well anyway, so everything about this is redundant. Then there's one called These Final Hours, which is kind of a horror movie, actually. This is a movie where there is an impending apocalypse. I think it's, they have like 3 more days or something, and they know that a comet is about to hit the Earth. So this movie basically explores what the hell you do with that time left when you know that you have specifically that amount of time left. And a lot of people become total, just wild fucking animals. They become these disgusting people. People betray people left, right, and center. People are having all these just rages and parties and whatever. There are people getting drunk. There are people just having sex and stuff at parties and stuff. There are people killing other people. There are some dark things happening here, as the main character has to traverse all this to find the father of a missing girl who he has found just, in the wild and whatever. He's trying to help this girl find some peace in these final hours. This is definitely a very depressing film. It's kind of a hard watch, to be honest, but I also think it's a really great one that deeply explores humanity and what we do in desperate times. I think that it is one that is very interesting in terms of showing a real depiction of what might happen in this situation. And it's an unfortunate depiction, but a believable one. Then there is a comedy movie, a comedy crime movie called Two Hands with Heath Ledger in it, and he's quite young in this film. It's like I said, it's a crime movie where he gets kind of stuck, caught with the mob and everything. He owes some people money and all that kind of shit. It's kind of a generic crime story, but it's like so much more funny than you might expect. It feels very kind of like the Australian version of Tarantino or something like that, and I really enjoy this film quite a lot. Then there is The Castle, which is an Australian classic, and it is a movie that I wouldn't recommend necessarily to people who aren't Australian, because I feel like they won't get it. I feel like they won't quite get the culture here. I feel like they won't quite understand why just certain things are funny. I don't know how to explain it, and maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's not as exclusive as I think it is, but The Castle is just a movie where not that much is really going on. There is a bit of a plot there when it comes to real estate, but apart from that, it's really just about this family hanging out, basically. And they're not special, wildly interesting people. They're just kind of people. It's just a normal family. And this movie kind of just shows you what a typical Australian family, at least at the time, was like. And I just kind of appreciate it for that. It feels like it really understands the culture well, and it kind of shows, I don't know, how a lot of us might feel like these slight kind of losers, but that maybe that's okay. I just found this movie comfortable and relatable for that. And it's funny. It's a good film. I like it. It's not a cinematic masterpiece by any means. It's not like, it's not that amazing, but it's worth watching, I think. Maybe. Then there is Animal Kingdom, which I just watched the other day. It's another crime movie, and a bunch of this was shot in Melbourne. They're like naming all of these suburbs that I recognize the names of. There's a few places I recognize. They went to St Kilda, and I'm like, oh my god, I know that street. And that was kind of exciting. Yeah, again, it's not the best film of all time, but it's pretty solid. I gave this a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I enjoyed it. Then the last one I wanted to talk about was Netram, which was a movie that, if you are following my channel, you know I watched quite recently. It is about a real-life shooter that did the biggest mass shooting that we had here in Australia that happened in Tasmania in, I believe, 1996. And it is a daunting watch. It is quite horrible, can be looked at as offensive, and I understand that. But as I've said already in my review, I think that this is absolutely brilliant and an important film, an informative film, and something that I think all Australians should watch if they can handle it, because I just think it's done so well, and it's such a complex film when it comes to the morality of how we feel while watching it. Netram is brilliant. Those are all of my favourite Australian movies, and yeah, so watch them all and everything. See if you think Australia is cinematically worthy, and catch me next time. Please do the things which are like and comment and share and subscribe and all that stuff. Now I'm gonna get out of here. Goodbye.